Get 40% off Pod Practice t-shirts by visiting our Ko-fi shop. If you're looking for a way to directly support us, order our Season 1 roster tee or our Otaku tee. Enter promo code PRACTICEPLAYER, all caps. We also offer free shipping to the United States and now ship worldwide. You can find our store at kofi.com/podpractice/shop or click on any of our links below or on social media. You can also make a donation to the pod through our Ko-fi store, and we'll send you a sticker. Thanks for all your support, and happy holidays. And for 10% off your next greatest bag purchase, use promo code PODPRACTICE10.
Welcome to Season 3 of Pod Practice with Team USA player Quinn Finer, Team USA Grandmaster player Mikey Lunn, and myself, Alex Atkins. You can now find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We want to keep growing the Pod Practice community, so reach out to us with your thoughts on IG and YouTube at podpractice_pod, or email us at show@podpracticepod.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
For some reason, your face has all of a sudden has gotten very low res.
When we upload it, it'll look better.
Good.
So you'll just have to get used to my low res.
It's not your best look, but
yeah, it might be better for you anyway, to be honest. Okay, well, welcome to a special episode of Pod Practice. Today we're welcoming in Robert Knob Rouse, a legend in the Ultimate community. I think if you're an Ultimate player listening to this, you probably owe a big thanks. So everyone listening can say it out loud, even though Knob can't hear you on the recording. But welcome in, Knob.
Nice to see you guys. How are you doing today? Bright and early in Denver. I think you guys probably haven't done too many podcasts at 8 a.m.
Certainly is
first
the earliest one, I think. But it's past 8 a.m., so I think it's time to be up.
Good.
Yeah. No, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I love having long conversations. It's really an exciting way to start the day. Got the ice bath, got the coffee. We talked to Isaac yesterday, and his finer thing was not looking in at his phone in the morning, so I held off for an hour, no screen or anything. Then we hop on. I'm ready to dive into some whatever topics we go into.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I guess for the history, it's funny. So this all came up because I don't even remember what I was talking to my dad about. I honestly, I should have looked back. We were talking just about like something, and your name came up. And we were just talking about how you're the president of WFDF, and he was like, and I was like, oh, that'd be a great person to talk to on the podcast. So we hit you up, and here we are. So can you give, and obviously, so my dad from back in the day, can you give a little rundown and some background on yourself and how you got into the sport, where you played back in the day, that kind of stuff?
Sure. So I started playing at the end of 1976. I was a freshman at a little school called Williams College up in Massachusetts. And I had come off a soccer season. I played soccer in high school and got mono at the end of the season. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Coach thought I was just dogging it. And finally I'm in the infirmary for a week. And I'm like, nah, yeah. But
God damn it, Coach.
Yeah. There was a senior who had taken a semester at on an exchange program in the 5 college area in Massachusetts and was introduced to the sport at Hampshire College, which was one of the powerhouses in the mid 70s. And he came back to Williams. He had been playing rugby, and he's like, this is a way cooler game. And so he basically figured out who had been playing soccer and, the small guys on the football team and so on and so forth, and like just cobbled together this team. And so we started playing in the wintertime of 76, 77. And I played for 4 years at Williams. Had a really good time. Obviously, the game was very different then when we first started playing. We were playing with a 153 gram
Yeah, I was gonna
master
ask.
Frisbee. There was no points. You played, timed games. Ideally, you would have a stopwatch, but nobody did, so we just played running time. There was no stall count. Almost nobody could throw a flick. So for sidearm, you threw the overhand wrist flick, or what
Right.
people call the chicken wing,
Right there.
Yeah.
which it deserves to be well down the list of priority throws, well below the scuba. And
Did you throw it a lot though? Was it pretty common?
it was because the 153 gram master Frisbee was pretty wobbly, so you needed to really be smooth with it. A flick, you need the disc to be pretty rigid to be able to take the Z's, and so
Yeah.
it worked okay. But quickly people figured out, okay, this flick is a little bit better. And when the 165 was introduced a couple years in, everyone was like, oh, this is a much better disc. But I think we even probably played a couple games barefoot. There was no big tournaments. There was the first multi-team tournament, I think, was in 1976, held down in Yale. And so, most of the games we played, we would just go off and go visit another college and typically spend the night and party with them. I think Williams, which is the college I went to, was the 25th college team in the U.S. And obviously there were 8 or 9 high school teams down in the New Jersey area, Staples up in New Haven, but that was about it. And the days of Whammo and the IFA were still around, and so they would host their Rose Bowl. And Stork, sort of seeing the writing on the wall with where things were going, got the UPA set up in 1979 with Tom Kennedy out of California. And that sort of changed things. It was still very much self-governed, self-organized, the major event for organization of the year, because this is obviously way prior to internet, and so you either sent letters or you made phone calls to get in touch with people. And so every springtime, we'd have what we called the East Coast Captains Meeting. We all go down to either typically Philly or DC. All the captains would get together and you'd exchange phone numbers and addresses and talk about times when you might be able to, get together. And so it was really the late 70s that the multi-team events started. The first nationals, obviously, you had these 5-team nationals that took place, I think 77, 78, and, sort of going into the 80s is when you really started getting a broader national championship, but it was still only men's team. Women who were playing on the men's team. Mm-hmm. So it was a very, very different age at that point in time. I finished college in 1980 and got a job with a Swiss bank out in Chicago, of all places. So I went out to Chicago, and first thing I did was contact the regional coordinator whose number I had, and he said, well, there's 3 teams coming together in Chicago this weekend. Why don't you go down and see if anyone, see if you can pick up with anyone. And so there was a team from University of Chicago on the south side of Chicago where the event was happening, a team from Northwestern, and a club team. The club teams has started to develop in the late 70s as people were graduating out of universities, in the same way that the college teams started as the high school kids were getting out. And so this team called itself Windy City. It was a bunch of guys who were drawn to Ultimate, but they had all been playing guts. They all freestyled. And so they were trying to figure out how to play this. And so, I forget, I might have played a game with the University of Chicago, and then like they came over and said, no, why don't you play with us? You actually look like you've played Ultimate before. And so I played with Windy City. I was out there off and on. I was going back and forth with New York, but I played with them through the '83 National Championship, which we won. I still had ties to the East Coast, so I played in the first tournament that the Rude Boys ever played in. I don't know if you ever heard of the Rude Boys, but
Yeah.
they won nationals in '82 and got the bid to go to the first World Championship in '83. And because I'd played with them a bunch of times, just traveling back to the East Coast, I was able to play in the first World Championship in '83 in Gothenburg, Sweden, which was very cool. It was basically they had done
cool.
they had started a European Championship in 1980, which Finland won, and Sweden fancied themselves as the best team in Europe. And in '83, they decided to invite a U.S. team to come to their European Championship. And so it was in late August of '83, and we went over there, and there was a little bit of talent and a little bit of athleticism, especially with the Swedish and Finnish teams, but we basically mopped up.
You kicked their ass.
And there was a women's pickup team that sort of got cobbled together, and so the U.S. kicked their butt as well. And it was a really good time, and it really showed me that the world was really big, and Ultimate was a really cool way to get people together. I bought a Eurail pass, and after the tournament, traveled for 3 weeks around Europe. I would basically either sleep at a Frisbee player's house in some city, or I'd jump on a train, take an overnight train to someplace else, and it was just really cool. But the community even then was really, really friendly, hospitable, and your connection being Frisbee meant you always had a friend wherever you went. It was really fun. And having played with Windy City down in New Orleans in '83 and winning, I got to go back to Worlds for the World Championship in '84 in Lucerne. Nice. Sort of a funny story. I think we have time to just have me digress here, right? So,
absolutely.
This is the best ever. Please.
So, one of my funniest stories about Ultimate, because from time to time it got a little serious, especially playing with teams like Windy City and New York. Here we are, we're on the fields in Lucerne. We've just won the championship. So we're partying and we're having a great time. And we basically don't want to leave the field, like everyone's sort of going off. It's just like we're there and it's getting dark. We're like, oh, damn, we got to go. And we're like, okay, who has a car? There was one car left and there was about 12 of us. And it was ludicrous. So we find a way to stuff ourselves in this car, and there's stuff going on in the car and everything else. And we're driving along. For some reason, I got stuck driving, and there's like 3 guys in the bucket seat next to me, and then a whole bunch of guys just stuck in the back.
That leaves like 8 in the back.
I think we had a couple in the trunk. So
right.
So we're going along. I'm like, guys, where am I supposed to turn? My navigator was not on the ball. And I'm like, here's an exit. I think we've been on this highway too long. I'm going to take this exit. So I zoom off onto this exit. Can't read the signs. And all of a sudden there's a cop right behind me. And it wasn't a regular cop. It was an Army cop. And so pull over, and he walks up and starts speaking in German. And I had taken high school German, so I knew about this much German. And I'm trying to explain, we had just won the World Championship, and we're trying to find our way back to our hotel in downtown Lucerne. And he says, well, everybody out of the car. So it's like freaking clown car. Yeah. Just people keep on piling out, and we're people are still in cleats and scuffed up. The fields, as I recall, were pretty bristly, but so people are bleeding and everything else. And he's looking at us, going, yeah, I guess it looks legit. So we basically got, what had happened is I had turned into an Army base.
Oh God.
Oh my God.
And so, it's basically this town overlooking the city. And so this Army base was at the top of the town, like you would have any good fort. And so he basically escorted us right to our hotel, and it worked out perfectly fine, but it was sort of a pretty silly thing. And
Could have turned
so
out much
I moved
differently.
back to New York basically a couple months before Nationals in '83, full time. And in those days, it was a little more chill. So I was actually playing with the Heifers to practice, but played with Windy at the regionals, nationals. And so anyways, I started playing with KABOOM. And with KABOOM, we had a pretty fearsome group. It was like the sort of half of it was the predecessor to New York, with Dobbins and Pat King and others. We in
Is Dobbins a little younger than you then?
Yeah. He is probably, how old is Ken? I would say he's probably 6 or 7 years younger than me.
Gotcha.
The 85, we came in second to Flying Circus, so did not qualify for the 86 Worlds. They decided to go to every other year after 84. And in 86, after a disappointing semis loss, basically the two New York teams, KABOOM and Spot, combined. And basically what happened is they put together a junta from each team, and the guys on the opposite team chose the guys they wanted to play with on the other team.
I like that.
It
people
was
need to do
like,
that
you know
more,
what? Let's just, you guys have a perspective on it. Yeah, you know who you want to play with, and so it obviously worked out pretty well. And 87 was a pretty fun year. Just new team. Everyone was just trying to figure out how to play with each other. The plays that were being drawn up, and there were a couple different things that got really established from the beginning. The idea of the pull play being absolutely imperative. You wanted to score 3 out of 4 times on a pull play, and it was basically 4 designated cuts and 3 underneath cuts if one didn't work. And you knew exactly what you're doing. In the early days, it was really uncomplicated. Obviously, as teams figured out that we were doing it, it got a lot more complicated. A second thing was always
was this was New York at this point?
Yeah. The turnover, you got to be off to the races. The first 3 guys near the disc got to be just running downfield. Doesn't matter what their typical position is. You got to keep the other team on their heels. And the third was just keep the defense on the field. And really worked pretty well. We had the benefit then of having won in 87 to go to the 88 Worlds in Leuven, Belgium, which was loads of fun. The town of Leuven is a university town. Huge square in the middle of the town, ringed with awesome restaurants and bars, and it was just a really fun event. And Worlds was getting bigger at that point in time. I think, not exactly sure, but I think that might have been the first year that Japan showed up. But you started seeing these new faces from around the world, and it was pretty cool. 89 was a disappointing loss in the semis, and it just fired the team up. But it also got much more intense. We'd have, here we are in those days. Nationals took place over Thanksgiving weekend.
Wow.
So it'd be a 4-day tournament. You'd fly in Wednesday night, and you'd basically have your, Thursday night, you'd eat turkey or a turkey sandwich at the hotel. And but what that meant for someone in the Northeast is you're practicing at night in mid-November, and I don't know how many times it was, there could be snow, but more often it was 33 degrees or 31 degrees and raining. It was just absolutely miserable. And being in New York, we didn't have real fields we could use in New York. So we would have to drive up to Westchester or out to Elizabeth, New Jersey, to find a field under the lights because it was dark. And, we were practicing, if we didn't have a tournament on a weekend, we were practicing Tuesday, Thursday, and then, for like 3 hours each night. And then on weekends, it'd be like 5-6 hour practices each day.
Were you going Tuesday, Thursday, and both weekend days?
Yeah.
Dang, that's some dedication.
And we got guys crying about Tuesday, Thursday.
You guys, it always is a little sad to see how soft people have become. But so, anyways, it certainly toughened you up, but it also, that culture of winning, sort of feeds on itself, right? And we certainly had more than a few competitive guys on the team. And, towards the end of the season when, regionals was done and you're just in the final 2 weeks of practices. I mean, there were times we had fist fights out there. I mean, because you'd basically set it up, work through plays, and then scrimmage, and you would have a team for the night, and it was hardcore.
That's so fucking
but
insane.
it was really I mean, a special time, let's put it that way. So came back 91 nationals again. It was down in Florida, and qualified for the Worlds in Oslo. And so that was sort of interesting as well. Funny story about that. So here I am. I had decided in '85, I was sort of looking at what was going on, and I'm playing on competitive teams, and I'm going, the UPA is not keeping up with the level of play. And, I mean, it didn't have much budget. Their main job was to host nationals and basically find people who would be regional and sectional coordinators so that some events could get scheduled. And they put out a paper newsletter that went out 4 times a year. And that was really their main function. But in terms of keeping up with the debate about, self-refereeing, pure self-refereeing or observers, absolutely clueless. Changing the rules and updating the rules, wasn't being done. We would still go to nationals and every other tournament, and there'd be a captain's meeting the night before the tournament started that would last 5-6 hours because everyone would come. And they had all these rules they wanted to try. They said, well, out here, out west, we're playing it this way. We think we should play it that way. And so you'd have these long, ridiculous discussions. People would come in and they'd want to change, the seating and the schedule play and things like that. And I was just like, no, this is ridiculous. So I applied to be national director in '85, lost to Gary McGibney, who's very nice guy. He made his campaign fighting what he called limit, which was, just the non-spirited calls being made on the play, and the myriad of calls that were being made, and some of which because people didn't know rules, some of which people were just crossing a line somewhere. And so he sort of did that for a couple of years, but things were only worse as far as I was concerned in terms of the UPA really grabbing the bull by the horns and finding a way to make it better. And so I ran again in '87. and was successful. So I took over as national director at that point in late '87, which made me the chair of the ultimate committee of WFDF. So here we are in 1990 in Oslo, and in the semifinals on the other bracket, it was Finland versus Sweden, bitter enemies, had been since the first European Championship 10 years earlier. And both teams are there. They're gathered. It's a morning game. Morning game? Afternoon game? It must have been no, it was morning game. No, afternoon game. Both teams are there. They're ready. Sweden goes up to their line. They're looking at their watch and going, the game's supposed to start. Finland is there, but they're not aware. They're not looking at their clocks. They're doing their pregame ritual, whatever. Sweden screams, we get a point. You weren't on the line on time. So we're looking at that. And so Finland goes, we protest. Anyways, game concludes. It's a 1-point game. In those days, we played to 21. Okay. At nationals, at Worlds, you always played to 21. That's the way we played. And the games could last 4 hours. I mean, I can talk about that later, but it was ludicrous in terms of trying to have a tournament schedule. But anyways, game is won by Sweden by 1 point. We have what's called the tournament rules group. Here I am. I'm being brought in. I'm like, I don't want to be here. So I'm like, guys, we call the tournament rules group. And I go, it seems like this is a gross violation of spirit. They were here. It wasn't like they were, drinking coffee. They were on the field. They just didn't line up because they weren't aware of it. And we didn't have someone blowing a whistle or a horn or anything. So it was, I said, it seems to me that, this has to be adjudicated on the field. You can't, this play can't stand. That 1 point can't stand. So you have two options, as I see it. Get together, play 1 point, winner takes all.
Oh my God. Second
option, play another game. And I don't see how you could really do it any other way, guys. And I said, but I'll leave it up to you. It's your choice between you. Well, they decided to play another game, complete game.
Holy shit.
And so
because
the finals were the next day, midday, they had to play the game first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning.
God.
Wow.
And it was
this
just
is so epic. Holy shit.
Crazy. It was just crazy. And Sweden squeaked by. I forget what the score was, but it was my teammates on New York are going, how did you strategize that? And I'm like, dude, I try to keep out of it, but but it was pretty amazing. And Sweden, they both were really good teams, and but in the end, I think that may have had a little bit to do with getting another victory. It just took a little bit of the athleticism that the Swedes had off the table. So
they only played like 80 points in the past few days.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, events, tournaments used to be crazy. It was games to 21, and we would play 4 or 5 games on Saturday. It'd start at 8 and go to dark, and then we'd play quarters, semis, finals on Sunday.
You guys are addicts.
It was there was a reason why we were, playing 4 days a week and playing 6 hours on, weekend practices. It was, it was a little bit different sport. There was more of a marathon aspect to it as opposed to just being a nice, calm 13-point sprint. And so you needed these rosters of 21 to 25 people and everything else. And there were certainly more than a few tournaments where everybody would be waiting because one game lasted 4.5 hours in the middle of the day, and you had 3 games backed up behind it. It really made a mess of trying to run a tournament. And so, it was only later that things like, time caps and everything else were incorporated. But certainly the 80s, early 90s were, they trimmed the game back maybe to, early rounds to 17 points instead of 21.
Which is
But
still a marathon by today's standards.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so, what else happened that was exciting? 89, Europe was getting to be a bit of a mess. And so here I am, I'm chair of the Ultimate Committee. 89, European teams are basically focusing all of their effort around their national team, and the club teams were dying. And I'm like, this isn't good for growth. And so came up with the idea of doing the first World Club Championship. And so that was held in 1989. We figured we'd do it in an off year from Worlds, which were still being done every other year on even years. And there was a demo that was done for the World Games, our first demo down in Karlsruhe. And so we found a tournament organizer in Cologne, Germany, to be able to run the first World Clubs. So it was an amazing success. People loved it. It gave new life to clubs in Europe, and it gave a whole bunch more people in the U.S. an opportunity to travel the world and just see the world community. And so it was like such a win-win. I could not have anticipated how good that was going to be. And just in a coincidence, given that I'm currently living in Cologne, Germany, it so happens that there was a woman on the Boston team by the name of Katie Shields, who was the sister of one of my teammates, Paul, who had been traveling around Europe on her bike, and she showed up to play with her team. And that was the first time I started talking to her, and she's now my wife of 32 years. So
congratulations.
That was so coming back here to Cologne was sort of a full circle for us.
Wow.
And so what happened after that? I decided I was getting old. I had an ACL reconstruction in 89. And so I'm about to get married or moving in that direction, and work is real. I mean, being able to maintain my day job, which was in finance, working, with an international bank doing corporate lending, and then doing loan syndications and trading in the late 90s. It was getting tougher. And so I'm like, it's time to hang up the cleats, but got a call going into the fall of 91 from some guys up in Boston who were putting together the UPA was going to have its first Masters Championship.
Right.
So got dragged
the
into that.
Masters always come calling.
Yeah. And so ended up playing with them. For that. We called ourselves Red Menace, and had the good fortune of winning that event, which was just good fun. And I did the same the following year. With the Rude Boys reunion team. So that was sort of my U.S. Masters experience. But in 92, obviously New York had continued on their roll, and the 92 Worlds were going to be in Utsunomiya, Japan. And like 2 months before the event, New York bailed. They're just like, we just don't want to go to Asia to play and beat up a bunch of people. So I put together a pickup team for the U.S. And, it was hard because this is, again, pre-internet days, pre-email days. Yeah. So like making calls going, who wants to go, and managed to cobble together a team of, 17, 18 guys. And, we went and shouldn't have stood a chance, but we ended up making it into the semis anyways before we basically ran out. We had two guys who had blown out knees, and a few other guys had taken the party too seriously the night before. So, but that was okay. And my last truly competitive tournament was Worlds in 94, where I played for USA Masters, which is good fun. That was in Colchester. After that, I did things like played Fool Fest in the DC area every year with a team called We Swill. It was with people like some of my old Rude Boys friends. Steve Mooney was on that team. Adam Zagoria. It was basically Williams and Wesleyan alums. And over the years we ended up winning it twice, so that was good fun. My last one was 2002, which we won. I figured that was a good time to go out. And so just played for fun, played some alumni
guys?
Events. I'm sorry?
Were they both dog players?
So the Adam was not. He does a lot of journalism. You'll see him pop up on social media. He also, he's a journalist by trade, sports journalist. So you see him at basketball games and tennis matches. I think are his two big things. He works for a couple different publications out of Jersey and Forbes magazine, I believe. But Moons obviously was a stalwart.
You don't know Mooney, Mikey?
Oh, I know Mooney for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Yep. So there was a few other guys who weren't on the dog team, but had certainly been core part of the Rude Boys as well.
So decided to hang it up early 90s, finished in about 2001. 2002.
2002. Yep.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. And so these days, played disc golf for fun. I certainly played. Would go back for alumni games. An occasional fun tournament, but it got tough. Up until a year ago in the summer, I had my ACL reconstruction, 3 scopes, all my right knee, and bone on bone for 32 years, and it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I went in, I tried stem cells, all PRP, everything, and the guys,
Germany's a place to do that too, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Isn't Germany like the place to do stem cells?
I was still in New York at that point in time. Talking to the HSS guys. Basically had a MRI, and they're like, "Oh, that's a bone marrow edema." I'm like, "What's that?" It's like basically a really bad bone bruise. So your bone is dying.
Oh my God!
My tibia had just been pounded on for so long, so I ended up getting a total knee replacement a year ago, July 31st, and after like 15 years of constant 24/7 throbbing pain, it's like gone now.
Oh, nice.
Why is that? Well, they cut out all the nerves and it's just plastic and metal now, but it really works well. I think 7 months in, or 5 months in, I was skiing. 7 months in, I'm out at Winter Park chasing my kids down the Double Blacks and in the woods.
Just up the road.
It works awesome. So I'm really happy about it. But
that is awesome.
I always wanted to wait until I turned 65. They originally told me when I was 50 I was going to need it. So
when you were national director, you didn't have to move to Colorado for that? That was just
So at that point in time, it was 100% virtual. So when I became national director in '87, I basically got sent a box of crap. It was
that's how it's written on your Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah,
it was like some old newsletters.
A box of stuff.
Yeah,
a box of stuff is the nice way to put it on the Hall of Fame thing.
Yeah. So, and it was mostly useless. It was like some manuals and a little bit of this and that, like.
This is literally a box of stuff. That's hilarious.
It was just a random box of stuff. So I set up a post office box, and we had, the reason why the UPA stayed together was there was a guy by the name of Carney Foy, who was an accountant, had played, never at a super high level, but was enthusiastic. He had his own accounting firm. And so for like 15 years, he was the treasurer of the UPA and basically collected all the dues, got all the roster lists together. He was just a one-man with a show with his wife Krita, and so I got to give a real shout out to Carney for holding the UPA together, because without that rock, it would not have it would have just crumbled. And so Carney did make it into the Hall of Fame as a contributor finally a few years ago, and well deserved for that.
Nice.
So I looked at the UPA, and I think when I first started, Brian Murphy, who'd been the second director of the UPA, went TK, Tom Kennedy, Brian Murphy, Gary McGivney, and then me. Brian was in New York, and I belonged to a gentleman's club at that point in time called the Metropolitan Club, which was at Fifth Avenue and 60th, and invited Murph over and basically sketched out my plan for what we wanted to do in terms of governance and talked to him about some of the ideas, and basically said, look, biggest problem that we have right now is people can't have fields because we can't get insurance. So we found an insurance policy that we could basically provide for tournament directors. Second thing was communications is really hard. At that point, I had started using email on something called CompuServe. My account was 71034 at CompuServe.com, I believe, and could communicate to those who worked at universities who were otherwise inclined to try to get one of these newfangled accounts. But we're like, got to make it easier for people to speak. And so the number 2 person at the UPA at that point in time was a woman by the name of Kathy Poofall. And Kathy was basically the women's director. And I said, Kathy, let's, as part of this new structure I want to vote in, I want you to be the managing director. I want you to be handling operations, because dealing with competition and governance and all this other stuff is more than the job that I can do. And so she had her father's business was out on Long Island. And so she basically commandeered an empty office, and we set up an 800 number, which was 1-800-GET-H, which whatever, they still use it today, but they don't really talk about that anymore. But it was my idea was it's either get help or get horizontal, depending on your mood of the day. And those two things really went a long ways towards providing some services to players beyond just, a newsletter, which we continue to do in the absence of any other, information mechanism, and the play schedule. And so, having established sort of an office space, then came the idea of, okay, we can probably afford a part-time person as long as we raise dues. And I instituted an annual survey just to get feedback on what people would bear. Because at that point, I think the dues in '87 were $7 a person. So first year we increased it to 10, which was awesome because it was almost 50% more revenue immediately. And I think by the time I finished, it was 25. But that provided a revenue model for the UPA to allow it to do something. And so we had a part-time person there.
Do you know, by the way, do you know your own UPA ID? I'm just curious how low it is.
14.
Holy cow. Do you know who one is?
That was Tom Kennedy.
That makes sense.
And number 2, I think, is Buzz Loughran.
Oh, Buzz. That's the Buzz that's here, yeah?
No, we have Buzz
different
Ellsworth.
Buzz.
Buzz. How many?
Yeah, he was I think the first regional director in the Northeast. And he played with the Rude Boys, Boston Aerodisc before that.
14, that's not bad though.
So did that for a few years, and in 92 decided to run for WFDF President. So as part of that, I stepped down. Neil Domber took over the UPA, but I stayed on as chairman of the board and basically assisted Neil. We moved the office from Long Island, from Kathy's place, to Neil's office down in Texas. He had a printing company. He was good with graphics. There's a couple of real classic Ultimate discs that he designed. just as a side note. But and over the next year and a half, decided that we should move out of his office to a standalone office space. There was, the membership had grown, the dues had grown with it, and so there was now enough money to try to do that. And Cindy Fisher had been on as a part-time person in Texas, and we looked at either going to Indianapolis or Colorado Springs, or I should say Colorado in general, given that those were sort of, at that point in time, sort of the two Olympic centers, and ended up moving to Boulder. And Cindy was there
Table
basically
Mesa.
on her own for several years, holding it together. There was overlap with Carney, and eventually we had to wean ourselves off Carney because he needed to get back his life. And so I did that through '94. And so in taking over WFDF, it was pretty much for the same reasons. I thought, it was a joke of an organization. They didn't have any legality around them. So put together, we got incorporated in Colorado. We put together an application to the IRS for our 501c3 status. We basically reorganized the organization to have a more solid board. Put a bunch of applications in for things like official recognition in the world of sport amongst international federations, put in the application for the International World Games in '94, and sort of got the house in order. And then in '94 decided it was time to really hang up the cleats for a while, which was good. Got married in '94, so first kid, or married in '92, first kid in '94. So it was sort of time to take a step back, which I did until I sort of got pulled into a debate in the early 2000s. I think in 2002, WFDF was having existential crisis. They were like, we have so much we could be doing, but we have no money. I think their annual budget was less than $10,000 a year at that point in time. They had a part-time person trying to do some work, which was basically had been funded because there was you may have heard of the .com boom and bust of '99 to 2000. There was a .com company that gave WFDF $50,000, which basically gave them some play money for a little bit of time. But they basically were like, well, we have a couple options. We can basically devolve the organization and just let, we'll have an ultimate organizations, a PDGA can have golf. We'll, if Guts wants to do their thing, they should do that. That's fine. Or we can basically just agree we're just not going to do all that much. We'll keep it as it is. Or we got to get our act together and try to figure out how to do things better. And at that point in time, option 3 eventually prevailed, although it was a hard discussion. And basically, a big part of it was, I came to the table and said, guys, without a revenue model, you're toast. You can't do anything. And they agreed and raised dues to a reasonable level, which still wasn't a lot, but basically gave them enough to actually continue to fund a part-time administrator and cover certain expenses for travel and the like. By that point in time, I think they were phasing out the paper newsletter that was sent 2-3 times a year, and you were starting to get a bit more digital. Anyways, in '05, I got pulled in by a buddy of mine from Finland who had been ultimate chair when I was president. And he's like, I'm president now, and we have no books. I have a treasurer who gives me a spreadsheet, and the numbers don't fit. They don't match what we have in the bank. Well, can you help? So I got pulled in to be treasurer. It took like 6 months to try to reconcile the spreadsheet to bank accounts, and got it as best we could. Set up a QuickBooks account so that you could actually have real books, and
This
So
sounds
that was sort of me getting back into WFDF, and served as treasurer for 3 years, and then just on the board for a couple of years. And in 2010, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, which had been set up, call it in the early 2000s, and WFDF had signed up because we were part of the World Games, and so we were told you need to be a signatory to the World Anti-Doping Code if you want to be in the World Games. Our first World Games was in 2001 in Japan with both ultimate and disc golf. If you want to do this, you got to be a part of WADA. WADA in 2010 basically sent out a note and said everybody has to be in code compliance. We're doing a big study that's going to basically be finalized next November. And you need to tell us what your education plan is. You have to have an updated internal policy that conforms with the WADA code, and you have to have a testing plan. And the current president at that point in time was a very nice, affable Aussie by the name of Potsy, Jonathan Potts. But he was like, nah, we don't have to worry about this. And Potsy was, I would put him in the quasi-visionary. Like, he had ideas. Not all of them were good ideas, but he had a lot of ideas. And unfortunately, with so many of our organizations by 2010 actually having their shit together, USAU, UK Ultimate, the Australian Association, Japan, and several others in Europe, people weren't doing things on the fly anymore. And, he would come up with something and said, 3 months from now, we're going to have a new event, the World Under 24s. It's actually a great idea. Execution was pretty bad. And there were safety problems at the Prague World Ultimate Club Championship and things like that. And I'm like, this is a mess. He would go on walkabout for 2 months, not respond to. There was a full-time, a half-time paid administrator at that point in time. Great guy by the name of Skippy Jammer, or Kevin Gibbons is his real name. Big freestyler guy, famous on the West Coast, and an awesome dude. But anyways, he would call me and go, we have all this stuff we have to respond to, and Potsy hasn't returned an email in 2 months. And I'm like, okay, this just can't work. And so ended up running against him and got sucked back into it and started in 2011. And we, at that point in time, as part of it, myself, Potsy, and Sandy Hammerly, who was our treasurer at the point in time, had been the USA administrator before that. The USAU administrator had been the one who actually changed the name and everything else. The three of us were a search committee, and we found, we said, we're ready for a full-time administrator. And so we put out a call and got, a couple dozen responses, mostly ultimate players, but one came from a guy who was from the world of Olympic sport. He had worked for Thomas Bach before Bach became president. He had worked with the Canoe Federation for their president, guy by the name of Volker Bernardi. Definitely does not have the look of an ultimate player. He's a big guy, and I'm talking German big. But trained lawyer, had worked in sport for 20 years, and really understood anti-doping. I mean, he had dealt with the CAS, which is the Court of Arbitration of Sport, which is the highest level of sport adjudication. Basically, if you're part of the Olympic movement, your bylaws say if there's disputes, it goes through CAS. So he sort of knew how to navigate this world, which was, we were starting to get ready to enter that at that point. And so he came on at the exact same time, and in 4 months, we had crafted an anti-doping policy, had set up an education plan, and had developed a testing plan around that. And so, things really changed there. Later that year, Volker heard that the IOC was going to be willing to have an intake of applications for IOC recognition. So we put together a 320-page application package, which we sent in dutifully, and then we're told, well, we're going to change what we're doing, so we'll tell you when we have the new package, but yours is in limbo for now. Anyways, we found out in 2012 what was the revision and added another 400 pages of material and got that in. And in, I guess it was May 31st of 2013, I was at a Sport Accord meeting in St. Petersburg, and we were approved by the IOC for provisional recognition. So that was really cool. And what was fun is at the end of the meeting, the meetings in St. Petersburg, my wife and I went up to Finland and visited my old friend Juha Jalovaara, who had been the president before Patsy, and we got to celebrate this milestone event. And so from there, it's really, we got our permanent recognition on the 2nd of August of 2015. We've obviously been growing. We've gone from, when I took over, I think we had 52 member associations. We have 111 right now, national members, and a beat
that means like different national
different countries.
bodies.
So
yeah,
the latest ones are Mongolia and the Comoros, and some crazy stuff. And so here I am today. I'm still waiting to hear what happened. There was a challenge to me as president from the disc golf chair. So we'll see what happens. I should hear in the next day or two whether I get another stint or what. So
the disc golfers are coming for you.
I love disc golfers. It's a bit of a fraught relationship just because I think for two reasons. One, the PDGA isn't exactly sure how to define itself, and they are an organization of individual members, whereas the rest of the world, the sport, is organized on a national basis. And so that, they aren't quite sure how to mesh in a matrix, right? They'd sort of like to have some way to mesh with the national organizations that exist, but those national organizations are aligned with WFDF, which has the Olympic recognition, which is what gives many countries access to resources. We have a number of countries who get funding from their governments because of the affiliation they have in the world of sport through WFDF. And so, and there was a period, I think also, which is relevant, is you are what you make of it. WFDF in the late 80s was predominantly overall oriented, and decisions about ultimate were being made by overall players. And when I took over, I'm like, well, this is bullshit. They don't know anything about ultimate at the highest levels. And we didn't have people in the disc golf community willing to really work under the umbrella of WFDF and make it work. So I think for the last 4 years, we have been working with the PDGA. Good night. They are an associate member of WFDF. We have ongoing discussions and try to coordinate with them and try not to step on their toes. So we host a World Team Disc Golf Championship, but haven't presupposed that we're going to have a World Championship, even though a World Championship organized by WFDF as opposed to the PDGA might be far more representative. We did a virtual disc golf championship, i.e. with an e-game a couple years ago, and I think we'll probably do that again this coming February.
That. I might win that.
There you go. Yeah, Disc Golf Valley, if you know it. But
I freaking love that game. Holy shit. Anyway.
And we are, we'll see what happens, but we are having conversations with the IOC because they have just launched an e-games Olympic championship. in partnership with the NOC
really?
of Saudi Arabia. So they're
Wow.
going to do their first formal event next November, I believe. And
Very cool.
we have the opportunity to potentially get on the demo program, which would be cool. So
with the Disc Golf Valley.
Look at this space later.
Yeah, that game is very good. I really like
it.
I play it on the plane because you don't need any service to play.
Wow,
So you
I've
can
not played it. I should check it
Oh,
out.
it's actually, what excites me about it is it's the first game that really has like captured the flight of a disc pretty well, and understands like the angle of like Anheuser to Heiser, and like I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Pretty fun to play.
Yeah.
It kind of surprises me that disc golf, or does it make sense to you that disc golf is under WFDF?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
So, let's look at the world of sport basically is pretty complex. And the concept of rivalry with new sports coming in is something that's always evaluated as to whether a new sport gets added to the fold. If you look at the world of martial arts, there isn't a form of martial arts that doesn't have 20 different styles or variations, where the differences are pretty subtle to the casual observer. In the same way, the sports organizations are looking at it and they're going, we can't just have all these different variations of games added just because someone thinks it's cool and has managed to get a bit of a following. And so in my mind, disc golf has two options. One is to go to the World Golf Association and say, gee, shouldn't we be under your umbrella?
Interesting.
And the question is, does ball golf have any interest whatsoever? There are a few ball golfers who like disc golf just for a little relaxation, but what incentive do they have? And the other option is to be under the WFDF umbrella. The fact that it's played with the disc, I think there's enough similarities. And if you look at it, I think there's synergies. So you look at me.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm I started off as an ultimate guy through and through, but today,
play a lot of disc golf.
I play disc golf. Why? Because it's fun.
Yeah.
Because I can do it. Because I'm still picking up a piece of plastic.
Right.
So
the joy of flight is still there.
No, I mean that's what it's all about, right? I think
if
all of us who play, you still go out there, and it doesn't matter how many throws you've had, how many throws you've seen. No. It's still so cool to see the disc and the wind and how they interact. Yeah. And ultimate is cool because unlike a ball, which is a parabola, the disc it goes and then it just slowly slows down and it slowly hovers to the ground, which gives rise to the horizontal dives that we love.
The time of the ball is dying. It's the time of the disc. I've been saying it. The ball, we are entering a new era. Well,
hopefully
humans.
This isn't the call from Mordor and, the time of man is over. It's the time of the orc or something like that.
Nope. It is. We are entering a new age. And I think, it really is that.
Your recollection of your career is so much more. It's so much clearer than my own.
I was going to say, wow, we're like, when we were like, it's a morning game? No, it's an afternoon. No, it was definitely a morning game. I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember when I played, what time I played Rhino last national. We're talking about the 89 World Club Champions, ridiculous.
Yeah, and I have so many questions that I want to follow up on. But the disc golf one is now interesting to me.
Yeah.
So if someone who was more disc golf focused were to take over as president, right, of WFDF, is there a concern over reprioritization away from ultimate? Is there any concern for ultimate players?
I think it really depends on the person and what their platform is. So,
right.
I had a conversation with Cy Hill, who is the CEO of UK Ultimate, a month ago. And Cy is the head of UK Ultimate. It says it in its name.
Mm-hmm.
However, 5 years ago, I announced to our Congress that all of our national federations had to take responsibility in some way, shape, or form for all flying disc sports, all flying disc disciplines in their country. And everyone agreed, and it's in our bylaws, and there's a transition period that basically says 2 years from now, you either have to have them be a full part of your board, or you need to align with at least the disc golf group and any other group that exists in some form of confederation. Doesn't mean you lose your autonomy, doesn't mean you need to share funding, but there needs to be a mechanism where there's a voice for all disc players. Cy's comment to me when this other candidate announced his decision to run was, you've done more to try to encourage this than anyone had done in 20 years. And I think that if one goes into it with the right attitude, we're stronger together. You look at it, and
I love that.
5 years ago, I would have said Ultimate is by far the largest practice sport of flying disc in the world. Today, I'm not so sure that disc golf may not have surpassed it because of the huge influx of people playing disc golf in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they've lost some of those people.
Base at this point.
Their renewal rate hasn't been as strong as they might have hoped, but I think it definitely evened the playing field, and I think we're all stronger. These days, 40 years ago when I said Frisbee, people would say, "Is that the thing with the dog?"
Yeah.
7 years ago when I said Frisbee, they said, "Oh yeah, that's a team sport with Ultimate." These days, half the time they say, "Oh, the basket, I see it in the park."
Yep.
Yeah.
And
anecdotally, nobody has ever really known what Ultimate is when I tell them I play Ultimate.
What I like is I see more and more articles in various mainstream publications where they no longer have to explain it. Yeah, they just assume people know, or they'll leave the explanation to the end just for the person who may have been under a rock for 10 years. So
kind of collecting media hits of mentions of Frisbee, like Jason Garrett mentioned it on an NFL broadcast.
Yeah, he does a lot. Interesting.
He does. One of our teammates, or one of Alex's teammates, a guy I coached, Jay Frood, that was awesome. He got called out by Randy Moss and actually got sent some NFL a pair of receiver gloves.
He got signed Randy Moss receiver gloves from the show. You got lost, which is like probably. I mean, that's like the
coolest thing of all time.
The child in me, especially, was like freaking out.
Yep.
Yesterday we were talking to Isaac and it came up on a podcast. Ultimate Frisbee came up on a podcast comparing it to like pro sports with Colin Coward and Nick Wright. And there was a funny, very subtle one. I was actually watching Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist. He has a podcast, and he had Bill Nye the Science Guy on, who is an Ultimate player. And
originally Cornell.
They were just talking about his bow tie, and they were talking about whether or not it was a clip-on or an actual true bow tie. And he kind of subtly said, without even mentioning Frisbee, he said, if I wore a clip-on, it would be against the spirit of the game. And I just kind of I had to rewind and play it back, because it's like so ingrained in him to say something like that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. All right, so I've been talking all about myself. Do you guys have any sort of more generic questions or?
So many.
Well, I was going to say that was like the best monologue, hands down, we've ever had on the pod. I mean, that was amazing. I was so happy to be here for that.
Really interesting. It's so cool to hear the history and have it kind of documented now.
Yeah.
Or recorded.
100%.
Well, obviously, it's my perception on it. So, yeah, it's those pieces
Yeah.
I participated in.
Well, I definitely want to know about the history, and I'm curious to know about your thoughts on how the game has grown. But just your time in Chicago, did you happen to play with Dave Buckholes or Mike Glass?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah, we've been interacting with them
Yeah.
quite a bit. So Nate
Mike
Buckholes, who
Glass.
is
Yeah. I don't know if you've spoken to Mike Dowd.
I
He
don't
was
think I've ever
big.
spoken to Mike Dowd.
Okay.
I had a great conversation with Mike and his wife Nancy at
Yep.
Club Nationals,
Yeah,
watching
they were in
their
a good
son.
mood. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
No,
just-
They seem
no
to be
stake in
doing
that
great
game.
all weekend. I don't know.
Just
Wasn't my experience, but
It's a
they were doing a fantastic
family thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, when he played, did not smile that much. He was a very hardcore competitor.
Yeah, I played disc golf against him. I got that sense.
And Alex, your roommate Nate is Dave's son.
My roommate Buck.
Yep.
Yeah, Buck. We call him Buck Junior, I guess.
Yeah, Buck Jr. Because
But when Buck Senior's around, I defer. I give him Buck, and I do go to Buck Junior. So I have some respect there. I definitely.
Well, as the younger Atkins, you don't look like you would qualify for your dad's moniker of Big Rick.
I've been trying to get there for years, but no,
You know
I
what?
don't.
It could be in your future if you don't watch out.
I think the big separation there is the love of beer and the fact that
Yes.
he was a brewer. I think if I got a little bit more
yeah.
into the brews, I could probably get there.
I think he actually had a brew house in my wife's hometown of Devon, PA, for a while.
Yeah, he was a brewer there for a little bit. Yeah.
Yep.
Although he was always just bigger. He played football. I didn't play football.
Oh yeah.
He was.
I still remember him. I had gone back for a game at my tournament at my old college in Williamstown, Mass, called Purple Valley, named after the purple mountains around. And I think I had hitchhiked in from Chicago, and
That's
he
so
was
classic.
walking the
He's
Appalachian
probably
Trail
hitchhiking. Right, he's doing the same.
with Jack the dog.
Oh, Jack.
He was
Jack the dog.
he was hiking the Appalachian Trail with Jack the dog, and he showed up at the event on purpose. He knew the timing, and just because it was a really fun event, and it's a beautiful place. But certainly,
Is he always referred to as Jack the dog? I feel like Alex, you also call him Jack the dog.
that was his name. It was Big Rick and Jack the dog.
We've got a good. There's a pretty good movie on Jack. We'll have to air it on Pod Practice sometime. Jack goes to Washington.
Yeah, my daughter has a. I remember that. My daughter has a person on her ultimate team, and oh gosh, it just escaped me. But it's what is her name? She has a dog, and it's begins with a T. I forget, but on the Philly team, I'll probably remember later. But same idea. You have the human and the dog. So
Yeah.
There's that tight bond.
yeah.
And it is funny, just like even as you're talking through your ultimate story, like, and you mentioned like that community and when you're traveling, and it's just one of the most relevant parts. And for Mikey, because you don't know, Knob married to Shields, Emily Shields, so Knob's brother-in-law's daughter was one of my like summer league teammates growing up. I mean, she's from Philly, so we just had a lot of interactions, and she's a really great player. Was one of the better players that I played with growing up.
Yeah. Well, in Denver, I don't know if you ever ran into my eldest. Her name is Kristen Rao, goes by the nickname Pope. She's played some mixed.
Wow. I
over the
wonder
last
if I
few
have.
years.
I bet I have, and cannot picture her right now. But now that you mentioned like the name Rao, now that you say it and associate it with Denver, it is ringing some bells.
I think the problem here with I'm not as tapped into the scene here, and it's funny because we talked about it with Isaac a little bit yesterday, but because of like PATA and all the leagues, like I knew everyone, and you just know everyone because everyone goes to summer league and you play against them or you're on their team. Whereas here, I just I played on Bird and I played on Bravo and I played on Summit.
Yep.
You just don't. I lack some of the community that I had in the Philly area, which is one of the great parts about Philly.
My middle one, Gwen, plays with Flight and Surge, so fun to see the activity down there. Yeah, Philly. The PATA, phenomenon is awesome.
It
it's
really
sort of like
is.
WFC, PATA. Some of these summer leagues are just so incredible. And they've been going on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that in Denver. Actually, we were talking about this last night too. I don't really get my playing fix anymore. I'm plus 40 now, so I'm mostly coaching. Well, what do you think about where the sport is today and how it's grown? Like when you look at players today, do you long for some of the old days to be integrated, or are you just totally stoked? What comes to mind?
I think that there's a couple different parts to it, right? So the level of athleticism, I think, has improved. I mean, I think we were good. We were hardcore. It was a different kind of training we were doing then because we were training for, 7 or 8 games to 21 on a weekend. So, you needed, it was less about that last 2% of fast twitch and more your ability to just keep pounding when your calves were burning and cramping and you were basically you'd gassed out after semis and you needed to dig deep to just find that fifth gear. There are aspects of the throwing game which I'm just awed by. Throws are the depth of the throwing talent is really incredible, and the pinpoint accuracy, even with wind. Part of it, I think, is a little bit of the tweaks in the discs that have taken place, but a lot of it is just that they're throwing they're
by the way,
6.
when did you start playing with the 175 gram Ultra Star?
The Ultra Star was introduced. That's a funny one. I decided in 1990 that we should give all the disc manufacturers a chance. And we put out a request for proposal and said, we are going to designate an approved disc. WAMO supported the UPA with an allocation of 3,000 free discs a year, and that was their contribution. But nobody knew it. And but for the UPA, that kept us alive. Discraft, on the other hand, was doing their ambush marketing. They would, they'd give out some freebies. They were, more cooperative. In the second half of the 80s, WAMO basically had been sold. They had moved production down to Mexico, and they started having quality control problems that really were starting to piss off people. And so we said, all right, RFP's out. What are you willing to put on the table, Discraft and WAMO, to support the UPA going forward? And we're going to be willing to make a decision based on quality of the disc, the amount of money you throw on, and sort of whatever intangibles that we might think it may do. At that point in time, people sort of were familiar. The Discraft had become ubiquitous enough. People were familiar with it. Obviously a different disc, but people would play with it from time to time. And there was a board vote. Good news, both manufacturers came in with far more money than WAMO ever had previously. And so it was a question on, disc quality and where we wanted to go with it. And it came down to a board vote that was decided by one vote. And Discraft was chosen in 90.
Point.
It's insane.
Wow. Now I'm curious more about that, but I do want to go back to the differences in the
So
sport.
I'd say the final difference I would say is there are different strategies being used. I'm not convinced all of them are better. For example, I'm always amazed at how people don't use the pole play. to really get the offense, the defense off guard and really chew up some really quick yards, but to do it methodically and with expectations they were going to be successful. The defense.
You got to send us some of your old pull plays when you get a chance. I'd love to see
I'm still disappointed that when I see the disc down at the end zone, you got people running across the end zone back and forth, absolutely clogging anything you might want to have. It doesn't happen as often as it might have, but it still happens. And I'm just like, why? There's very few reasons why that makes sense ever. And then the final piece of it, I'm still of two minds about is the dump, because it seems like it gets used so much. And I would sort of like to see it be sort of like, look downfield first. Don't look for the dump first. Sort of like in American football, the West Coast offense. Just get it moving. Just keep it moving in the right direction. Don't basically wait 3 seconds or burn 3 seconds and then immediately go to the dump. Try to have a little more flow. And so those, me as I'll call me a more casual observer these days. I'm not coaching. I'm not trying to suss it all out, but I do go to big tournaments. And
when you guys were coming up with strategy back in the day, were you borrowing from other sports, or was it just like what you felt like worked against teams you were playing?
Certain aspects were certainly borrowing from other sports, sort of some of the misdirects and things like that. But a lot of it is ultimate oriented. It's like sideline trap. A, when do you put on the sideline trap? B, how do you break the sideline trap? That's a particularly ultimate kind of thing. On defense, I think we were probably the first to really start using defenses that would shift midpoint. So, and just to try to, go down, slap on a zone, third pass, you're on man,
transition,
or vice versa. Just try to, at the time we were playing, it was really trying to keep the other team off guard. And then, every few months, you'd basically say, okay, our main competitors know what our strategy is, so let's use that as the misdirect, and let's give them a different look, but or a different play with the same look. And so I think that's very similar to what you see happen again in the NFL these days. Those defenses, they're just trying to be as confusing as possible, either being consistent and showing something and then shifting at the last second, or basically absolutely changing everything in the way they do it. And those are things I think that were revolutionary in the day. I don't know, and again, I don't see teams consistently enough to see whether that is something that's being done today.
Were you around for like the invention of the stack?
Yeah. I mean, when I played Windy City, we basically played straight up man to man, and we basically just said, we are going to outrun every other team. Everybody is going to run 40 yards downfield and then run 40 yards back as hard as you can. And even if you're not open, that other guy is going to be far more tired than you, so that when you do it the next time, he's going to be half a step behind you. Wow. And if you run downfield and he's not keeping up, well, then the disc is going downfield. Probably mid 80s is when the stack first started getting developed to try to make sure that you weren't clogging all the lanes
to run in. Yeah.
No, it was like 1985. It was a warm, sunny afternoon, Tuesday. 3 p.m., about 76 degrees, we invented the hose stack. Wind was coming out of the southwest.
I think it actually, I think I think it was mostly being developed on the West Coast. And there was something called the Stanford O that really introduced a lot of innovations on offenses as well.
And then you on New York, were you there when you started to do the clam and like kind of surround the vert stack?
The clam basically was Boston's attempt to try to shut us down, and so we then adapted it in our own way.
And then maybe that was when the hose stack started to come out a little bit.
And so the hose stack first saw something like that playing against Sweden. And so it was originally called Swedish because what they would do is have 3 guys who were handlers, 4 guys downfield who would basically, the 4 guys downfield were incredibly athletic. B, they couldn't throw as well as 3 guys who were handlers. And so it was really a way for them to use their strengths. And so that really was sort of late 80s that idea started slowly getting incorporated. It really, it wasn't until the 90s, I think, that you really saw the hose stack start being used on a more regular basis.
And what about the German? When did you see that first?
I don't know what the German is.
Okay, cool. I was just trying to get the whole history lesson. But it's cool, like even hearing about like the Swedish doing the hose stack and they have the 3 handlers, and it's just like something to think about when you're deciding, structuring your offense for your team. It's just like that's what their strengths were, and they came up with something original to do it. It's just fun to kind of think about it that way. It just shines a different light on it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you who some of the best players you played with were. I mean, we mentioned Kenny and we mentioned Mooney, and then who some of the best were and like what made them so good back in the day? Like what made them really stand out?
Well, I mean, I think you could go to the Hall of Fame page and see a bunch of names. I mean, there were people on many of the top elite teams who were incredible, who also aren't on that list. But if you look at, those who stood the test of time, Ken Dobbins, in my mind, is probably the single best ultimate player ever in terms of credible throws, credible D, awesome field sense, money player. Like when the game got really hard, his game just rose. I mean, sick. 85 nationals were playing in DC, and Ken goes up, blows out his ACL in the semis, comes back and is playing in the finals with no ACL.
No.
And having just gobbled a handful of ibuprofen.
Oh my God.
Other teammates of mine. I mean, Pat King, was an incredible all-round player. He and Kenny were incredible strategic thinkers. I really give most of the credit to those guys. You look at, Moons or Jeremy in Boston and a whole host of other players. You look at Windy City with Glass, Joey Giampino, who was passed, but who was just an incredible athlete and could catch anything. I forget what year it was, but he had broken his hand. So he basically had them put a cast on where these 2 fingers were separate so he could claw. And I remember one
unbelievable
absolute layout. The disc is a hammer blade coming down, and he just basically is there 2 inches off the ground, boom, disc in fingers.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
It was just incredible stuff, you know. I hate to name names. I'm missing so many people. Danny Weiss, with Flying Circus and then New York, all of the incredible guys.
Did the old teams have team logos?
Many of them did. So
I
you
would
have
love to like dig those up.
you have like Flying Circus, which was a clown, stylized clown face. KABOOM. There was Kimmy Sue would do these prints that were sort of multicolor, all sorts of stuff.
We need to find
KABOOM.
contact info for all these teams. I would love to just.
I know.
Yeah, Windy City
honest,
had a couple different logos they used over the years. The original one was a big swoosh for Windy, city thing. Then they did a Bowery mask type thing. Like a lot of So even though you didn't have formal uniforms in the day, you did have team identity. The hostages would basically take a wire fence and black spray paint, and that was their persona.
That's funny.
The Rude Boys had the black and white checkerboard on the shirt.
This episode will definitely be the spark of the
I'm going to do a lot of research on
an Ultimate History series where I think we'll be reaching out to many more of this time. Were you there during that Pat King speech where it's one of my favorites, and I maybe it's in the movie, I forget what it is, and he's like, we got 20 guys on our D line. They got 7 guys on their O line. Were you there for that?
I'm not sure I recall that specifically. I mean, I remember a lot of impassioned.
I'll find the click. Yeah,
a lot of impassioned Pat King speeches. He is an incredibly brilliant guy. He was a lawyer for a long time, but he had a way with words. He wrote a musical. He used to write poetry, and
wow, that's really cool.
The chants we would have with New York were not all for your mother's hearing, but
yeah. Well, that one gives me chills. I remember busting that out a few times during my last year on Bird, because I guess I had watched the movie, and it's just like this really exciting where you're like, we got 20 guys on our D line, they got 7 guys on their own line, they can't run with us now and they can't run with us later. It's just such a hype. It's just such a hype Ultimate speech, and it really fires everyone up. That's so cool.
Well, what's your take on Pro Ultimate, and where do you want to see that go?
Yeah, this is a good segue into your call.
You have a phone call coming up here in a few minutes.
So, there is one incredibly important thing that they're doing with the semi-pro leagues, and that is they are trying to build spectators and fans. One of the things which is a good and a bad about the way Club Ultimate is played, or globally, even with Worlds, is that you have these huge tournaments, and you get to see everybody, and it's so much fun, and you realize you're part of such a community. But the bad part of it is that you don't build a local fan base.
Right.
Because you're playing all these tournaments at a place where you could, it's like going to World Clubs. You're going to a place that has 32 fields, which is out in the middle of Nowheresville in Ohio.
Yeah.
And the people there, because of their various ongoing tournaments, actually know about it, but it's not like you're building a local fan base. So the idea of establishing ties to the community that give people a reason to be rooting for a team, I think has a lot of merit.
Definitely.
Having the regularity of a set schedule every week makes broadcast in whatever form, OTT is perfectly fine these days, workable and feasible. because you have a set schedule. You know that you can see it, and potentially with time, if we can get some more eyeballs, you'll be able to attract sponsors to help support the growth of the game. And so in my mind, those are all the incredible things that they've shown us. I think that if you think about the original AUDL, it was started by some second tier player in Kansas or something who thought he could make some money doing it. And being sort of a second tier player, he was like, well, we got to make it look just like every other sport. So he said, we got to have referees.
Right.
In my mind, that is really the biggest mistake I think they've made, because they really alienated the core community from the very get-go.
Right.
And it's not necessarily, I mean, observers, I think, works really darn well. Referees clearly don't work perfectly in any sport.
Right.
And so why do you need them? I mean, the players can make a
Right.
call. If they can't make the call, put it back. With an observer, you have, somebody who either saw the play or didn't, and there's a mechanism to adjudicate it. You need to be able to adjudicate fouls and violations quickly, but having a referee and a penalty makes no sense to me. What is a 10-yard penalty in ultimate when, as I was saying before, half the time someone catches the disc and the first thing they do is turn around and throw it 10 yards back to their dump cut. I mean, so those are some of the things I think I'm disappointed about, because I don't think it's necessary. And I think you could showcase the game, and having these really good games where you see a referee spoils it for me a bit.
Yeah.
And so, looking forward, what do I think can happen? We have participation, and then we have spectators. And that's really the way to think about, in my mind, that's the way I think about the UFA these days, or the PUL. You're looking to build a fan base, you're looking to build spectators, so that you're creating value for the team owners and the league. From a player's perspective, club is brilliant. You want to play. You don't really care about building your fan base, although it would really be nice if you didn't have to pay 100% of your own costs, right?
It would be nice.
But you're probably, there's a reason why it's tough to start a league, because you need to basically make room amidst this entire sport coverage. And if you don't have your player base fully on board as your main spectators, you're not going to really grow too much beyond that, at least in these early days, right? Until there's a buzz, until the local, news blog is picking you up and they're reporting what's going on with your UFA or PUL team, along with NFL, MLB, so on and so forth. So it's a little tricky on that side. I think as well, something like the UPA National Series gives a competitive reason for a lot of people to be playing. And I think that the two things coexisting for right now is perfectly fine.
And how long can that?
Yeah, how long can neither can live while the other survives?
I disagree.
No,
with that.
It's not like
they,
that.
They have they're presenting something very different. They're each presenting something very different.
No.
Made a big mess. Oh, my earbud was messing up. Oh well. So much for my Nalgene.
Gotta hydrate.
Yeah.
There's no more hydration.
So, but I'll look at this question from the opposite angle. What should the USAU be doing today? And in my mind, maybe it's the direction they're trying to head with the announcement of their new CEO. Is they've really got to grow youth. That's a future. If you look at any sports participation, it's a triangle. Down here are
Right.
youth, and then you have your elite at this little tippy top 0.1%. And I am hopeful that they're going to be able to be successful in figuring out these state programs and their youth program, because it's not about getting kids to go to a national championship. It's about setting up an infrastructure so that people can be playing 10 minutes away from where they live in an organized league that is a local league. For
Right.
that, we need people, and it's no longer even people like me anymore. It's people like you guys, or maybe more like you, Mike, who are getting to that point where their coaches, they don't strap on the cleats to play competitively as much anymore, but they want to give back to the community. They want to grow the sport, and they're willing to run the league in their local town or be a coach, maybe dragged in because their kids play, but to be a coach and to be a part of that sort of AYSO, Pop Warner, Little League
Right.
type infrastructure that allows you to grow your game.
Yeah. And if USA Ultimate can help foster that, I think it does make a lot of sense. I think about when I filled out the USA Ultimate survey 15 years ago, I was very focused on Elite Ultimate, and I wanted them to focus their resources towards that. And now, 15 years later, whenever I fill it out, I realize I think I was really short-sighted in the way I was thinking back then, and the focus on youth is so critical for, especially I think for USA Ultimate. And now that we have the semi-pro leagues, I think it makes even more sense.
And then the final thing before we let you go, any exciting things on the plate of WFDF, or what is going forward for that organization as we looked at UFA, USAU?
I mean, I think that if you look at our strategic plan, number 1 and 2 is grow youth, which for WFDF means we have to help our national federations do it because we're a step removed. And we need to give them some educational curricula tools. We need to give them coaches training, which we're trying to do all this right now. And then the second is to get on the Olympic program. And for us, getting on the Olympic program isn't just an end goal for the sake of being on the program because it'd be cool. It's there because of the credibility and the visibility it would give for our sport, which then helps us grow the youth, which then helps us grow into new countries, which then gives us the credibility with national Olympic committees to recognize their national members, so on and so forth. The goal right now is Brisbane 2032. I was down in Brisbane.
Damn, I'll be pretty old, man.
You will.
That's going to be tough.
You might be a coach by then. So I was down in Brisbane at the end of March, met with the organizing committee, the CEO, Cindy Hook, and the director of sport, Brendan Keene, just to introduce ourselves. And they knew of us, had a very friendly hour meeting. As you know, we had our Worlds down in Gold Coast, which is just half an hour south of Brisbane. Invited the OCOG, and the CEO, who had just gotten off a plane a day earlier, actually came down and spent 4 hours with us on Father's Day.
Bomb.
So pretty happy about that. But this is I'd like to say it's a really clear, transparent process, and it's anything but. Furthermore, we're going to have a change in the IOC leadership early next year. So who knows what's going to happen? Who knows how it's going to work out? The process has shifted a bit. Host cities get to designate up to 5 sports that they'd like to see for their edition of the games. Those sports aren't necessarily permanently on the program. So Breakdancing didn't make it to LA. And the NFL wrote a nice big check
out there.
And so we're gonna have flag football, which is sort of maybe not so different from Ultimate in that it's a participation game, not a professional sport. But so we'll see that on. So who knows what will happen with that? I mean, what we're trying to do in the meantime is make it as difficult as possible for the local organizing committee and IOC not to let us in.
Right.
So by doing that, what are we trying to do? We want to be universal. So we have 111 member countries. Within 2 years, we hope to have over 125. We want to get National Olympic Committee recognition for as many of our member federations as possible. Whether we make it or not, getting that recognition gets them money. So last weekend, for example, Germany finally got the National Olympic Committee recognition by the DOSB, which is their National Olympic Committee. And Italy is in the same process. There's one final meeting to get that signed off on. We have 23 countries right now that have NOC recognition, including US, which is really cool. But we should get more. And we actually hired a booth down at the Association of National Olympic Committee annual general meeting in Portugal a month and a half ago, and met 128 different representatives of National Olympic Committees, because this, in my mind, is sort of the backdoor to sort of having us gain visibility that is so crucial. The final piece of it is the hardest, which is thinking about how do we build an audience that's sufficient enough to make advertisers take and sponsors take notice, so that they look at us and go, no, this will draw an audience. And so what we're trying to do is heavily increase our social media presence with short form stuff, the kind of stuff you guys are doing that people are listening to, watching these days.
For sure.
And it's not just watching an entire game from start to finish, but it is the stories around it. It's the stuff that people are gravitating towards these days. Little clips, give me highlights. Give me red zone. I don't want to watch an entire afternoon of NFL,
create some narratives.
My grandfather used to do.
We were talking about that yesterday, Nob. If you can orchestrate the first really nice Ultimate documentary, I would love to see it. I'd love to be a part of it. We could get anyone, but no, I think I've seen some really cool ones on that too, but I agree. I think that's so cool. So finally then I'll borrow a question that I hear a lot on one of my favorite podcasts. What gives you hope about the growth of Ultimate and just about the sport in general as we look forward?
So here I sit in Cologne, Germany, because I quit my job a year and a half ago and decided to go back to school and get a PhD in sport management. So I see all this academic research, and it's, I'm here not just to get educated, but because it's really fun to be living in Europe for a bit. But what really gives me a lot of hope is I think we have a really fun sport. We talked earlier about, the fascination with the flight of the disc, and that doesn't go away. We have a very inclusive sport. It's a social sport. It can be very, very competitive. I mean, I talked about fist fights at a practice earlier, but at the same time, you have the spirit of the game, and your opponent can score a point, and you can give them a hand up. It can be, the fastest growing part of the sport is mixed globally. From a developmental tool, that is so cool. From a developmental tool, the fact that it's cheap to get going and play this, you just need $12 equivalent piece of plastic. And so growing it across the world is fairly easy. It doesn't do us much good in comparison with disc golf because you can have one disc amongst 20 people and you're perfectly fine. Whereas, there's 20 discs in every disc golfer's bag. So, that
20 is
necessarily,
is the lower end of the.
yeah. I'm at any given day, right? So it's a kind of thing where, there you go.
About
Nice.
23 in there, I think.
Nice. But so I think all of that gives me hope that in this big world, we got something that's interesting here, right? It's still growing, although I think we've stalled out a little bit because there hasn't been a big enough focus on the youth development. And I'm hoping we can see that really pick up across our various countries. Let me see what I have here. I mean, it's been a really long time since this thing got pulled out.
Holy smokes, man!
So,
this
but
is
you know
epic.
what? It still works. It still works, and I think
Oh my God,
people have been playing with this for a reason. We've moved on to this, but it's there. And I think that is the fascination that's going to keep us growing.
If you're just listening, now pulled out a pie pan from about the 18th century that I think will still fly. No, that is awesome. Well, I couldn't agree more with you, Nob, and I love the fact that you're focusing on the youth as someone who's been so influential in the sport and continues to be so influential in the sport. And I just want to say thank you. I mean, you've done, as someone who enjoys this sport and all the amazing things that it's given to me, I just want to say thank you because you've done so much and you're doing so much, and it really means a lot to me and I'm sure so many other people. And so thank you for coming on today. This was such an amazing conversation, such an amazing history lesson, so many insightful things that you said, and I really appreciate it.
Great meeting you guys, and good luck with your schedule here through the holidays. Sounds like you're teeing up a whole bunch of programs to keep everybody occupied. And, as I said, this is what we need. We need to just start, really, really going viral and making sure we're all, I think back in the day, everyone viewed themselves as a missionary. You didn't go traveling without a backpack that had a part of it with discs that you were ready to give out and just, introduce people to it. And that part of it has to continue because that's really the way it's going to work.
I need to do that more. I had that thought the other day, and you're so right. Like when I just go places, I'm going to start bringing the discs.
The feeling of hope too is good, and thoughts for the future because this will be the last episode we play of 2024. So it's a good way to sort of close things out and looking forward to 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, and in the end, the spirit of the game, that sense of mutual respect, but also the self-awareness it requires and the accountability you have to the other team, to your teammates, and importantly to yourself, I think is one of those things that really is the glue that in my mind makes it special and for the people who are participating in it. So I think we can make sure we preserve that as best we can. We'll all be better served.
1,000%. Well, we'll let you go clean that water up before your call with the UFA. I'm sure they can help get some things to go viral. But thank you so much for coming on. Hope everyone enjoyed. I'm sure you probably did. We'll see you later.
All right. Bye.